Why was she the only one not sitting at the briefing table? The others leaned over maps, their voices low, trading the kind of clipped phrases soldiers learn to live by. But Alexis Morgan stood by the wall, arms crossed, saying nothing. She was there yet not there. Useful but not trusted. Present but ignored. She had been like that her whole career. Out in the mountains of Afghanistan, silence had been her weapon. Silence in her breathing, silence in her trigger squeeze, silence in the way she vanished after the shot. The men in her unit had teased her for it at first. They wanted bravado, noise, the swagger of certainty. She gave them none of that, only results. And yet here on base, back in America, she was once again invisible. The irony stung. When the patrol went out that morning, she was their overwatch. Hidden high in the ridges, she watched their Humvees snake through a valley where the rocks could hide 100 enemies. 3 silhouettes shifted on her pulse slowed. Her body remembered what to do long before her mind caught up. She adjusted the M82, a mile and some change between her and the men about to kill her brothers. Distance, 1,450 meters. Wind, west to east, steady but unpredictable. Temperature 84. She exhaled, half empty, suspended in that fragile space between 2 heartbeats. The first target dropped before the sound of her rifle reached him. The second spun and crumpled. The third, the one with the RPG, sprinted, desperate, but physics had no mercy. 3 rounds, 3 bodies. Through the radio, her commander's voice cracked with something between awe and disbelief. "Damn, Morgan, that's 3 for 3 at nearly a mile. Nice shooting." She said nothing, only reported, "Valley is clear." Because that was her way, no victory laps, no smile, just the job. But when Captain reached her position later, binoculars still around his neck, his face wasn't purely pride. There was something else too, skepticism, doubt. "That was good shooting, Morgan," he said, helping her pack the 50 pounds of gear. "But don't think this is normal. Nobody makes 3 consecutive kills like that without some luck." Luck. She bit down on the word, let it sit on her tongue. Luck. That was always the way with her. Every shot was called luck, every kill discounted. As if her calm precision couldn't belong to her, as if the math in her bones, the instinct in her breath, the discipline carved into her soul were all accidents. She only nodded. Saying anything else would sound like defense, and defense always felt like weakness. Years earlier at Fort, an old man with a battered face had seen what no one else bothered to look for. Sergeant Major William "Old Bull" Harrison. He'd watched her on a shooting line when she was barely 20, a slip of a private among men twice her size. Her frame too slight for the heavy rifles, her voice too quiet to demand space. The others dismissed her, but Harrison had caught her eyes through the glass, that stillness. The kind you can't fake. On qualification day, she outshot them all. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" he'd asked her. "My father," she'd answered, a Gulf War veteran who once told her, "A rifle doesn't care if you're big or small, only if you respect it." Harrison never forgot. He fought for her, trained her harder, pushed her further. And when the military finally allowed women into combat roles, she was ready, one of the first through that door. Now, more than a decade later, Harrison found her again. Not behind a scope, but hunched over a bucket of brass casings on the firing line. "Morgan," he barked like the years hadn't passed, "what the hell is this?" She looked up, sweat streaking her brow, surprised into a genuine smile. "Didn't know you were on base, Sarge." He pointed at the bucket. "Medical board evaluation," she said softly. "Shrapnel in my right shoulder. They pulled me from combat, said I wasn't fit anymore." Harrison's face darkened. "So the Army's got one of the best snipers alive collecting brass." She only shrugged. "Someone has to." "Bullshit. Do you know how many people in the entire military have made a confirmed hit at 2,847 meters?" She didn't answer. "I can count them on one hand," he growled. "And you're out here sweeping casings." Her silence was her shield. She would not whine, she would not complain. Then her radio crackled. "Sergeant Morgan, report to the main range immediately. VIPs incoming." Duty was duty. She picked up her bucket and walked. Harrison followed, muttering curses about the stupidity of generals. At 1400, black SUVs rolled in, throwing dust across the range. Out stepped officers from every corner of the alliance, British, German, Israeli. Last came a man Morgan had never met but recognized instantly. His stride was pure predator, his insignia the SEAL trident, Commander Winters. The rumors about him traveled faster than bullets. The longest confirmed American sniper kill in Afghanistan, over 3,400 meters. A man made into legend. As the demonstrations unfolded, Rangers hammering silhouettes, green berets showing textbook precision, Winters watched with a predator's boredom. His eyes kept drifting to a far target no one else mentioned, a lonely silhouette set against a mountain 2 miles out. Colonel Michaels tried to sidestep the question when Winters asked. "That's just a theoretical target, 3,285 meters." "No one ever hit it," Winters pressed. "No, ballistics at that range make it virtually impossible." Winters smiled. "Nothing is impossible, just a matter of skill." He lay down with the M24 rifle they handed him, flawless form, perfect breathing. At 1,800 meters, his shots were poetry. When he rose, admiration rippled across the line. But when asked about the 2-mile target, he handed the rifle back. "Not with this equipment. Some things are best left theoretical." The message was clear. If even he wouldn't try, no one should. That was when Morgan felt it again. That old sensation in her blood, calm certainty, the still voice inside her whispering that she could. She set her bucket down. "Don't do it," Harrison muttered. But she was already walking toward the brass and braid. "Permission to attempt the long-range target," she said, standing at attention before Colonel Michaels. A silence fell. The SEAL commander turned, eyebrows lifted. Did the maintenance staff just volunteer? Snickers rose from the visitors. She didn't blink. Staff Sergeant Alexis Morgan, 2 tour, 47 confirmed kills. Longest shot, 2,847 meters. The laughter died. Winters studied her now, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can hit 3,285 meters with a weapon you haven't even zeroed, after spending the morning collecting brass?" "I'd like to try, sir." Michaels hesitated, caught between decorum and disbelief. Winters made it easier, his voice smooth. "Then let's make it interesting. If she misses, and she will, she returns to her duties without complaint. But if she hits, I'll owe her an apology. And if she hits center mass, I'll personally recommend her for the President's 100. "I accept," Morgan said. When she lay behind the rifle, the whole range seemed to lean toward her. The world went quiet. Her pulse slowed. She studied the wind, shifting west to northwest. She remembered Afghanistan. She remembered Mike Johnson, her spotter, whispering, "Jesus, that's got to be 2,800 meters," before she made the shot that carved her name into history. She remembered her father's voice, "Trust your training, trust yourself." One shot, no warm-ups. She exhaled halfway, stilled herself between beats and pressed. The rifle cracked. The sound rolled off the mountains. The bullet arced away, carrying a piece of her will into the distance. 4 seconds of silence. 4 seconds that felt like a lifetime. The spotters squinted, arguing, a shadow, a mark, too far to tell. Michaels ordered the Humvee. They drove 20 minutes across scrub and rock, Winter's smug smile riding with them like a passenger. At 50 meters, Morgan could see it. Her heart quickened. Fresh, clean, just left of center mass. A hit. The spotter explained it was exactly where the physics demanded, the crosswind nudging it off by inches. A perfect calculation. Winter's face soured. "Noteworthy," he admitted. "Anyone can get lucky once." Morgan spoke at last, her voice calm but cutting. Luck doesn't account for wind calculation, bullet drop, and atmospheric conditions. That was training, 20 years of it. For a moment, even he had no answer. That night, as the story spread through Fort, growing, twisting, turning her into legend and exaggeration, Alexis Morgan ate in silence. Soldiers she'd never spoken to approached with awe. Even her supervisor apologized, finally seeing her for more than broken. But she sat with her tray, quiet, thinking only of the shot, the feel of it, and the man who had tried to laugh her out of existence. Commander Winters. She had proven him wrong once, and she knew he would not let it end there. Why was the Navy SEAL commander walking straight toward her table? The dining hall noise dimmed. Forks paused in midair. Soldiers leaned back to watch. Commander Winters, ribbons flashing on his chest, carried his tray past rows of enlisted men who stiffened instinctively as he passed. And then he stopped in front of Alexis Morgan. "Staff Sergeant Morgan, a word." It wasn't a request. She rose, following him to a quiet corner. Up close, she noticed the shift. Gone was the mocking smirk from the range. His eyes now carried calculation, weighing her, measuring what he hadn't expected. "That was quite a performance today," he said. "It wasn't a performance, sir. It was shooting." "Just shooting." His smile was small, sharp. "Do you know what the longest confirmed kill in history is?" "I believe it's held by a Canadian. Over 3,500 meters, sir." He nodded. "Joint Task Force 2, before that mine, 3450 Afghanistan. The point is, what you did today was extraordinary, and extraordinary things attract attention." She stayed silent. She learned long ago that silence unsettled men like him more than words. Winters leaned closer, his voice dropping. "I've spoken with Colonel Michaels. It seems the Army has a habit of mismanaging talent. 47 confirmed kills, longest shot on record by a female sniper, and they've got you picking up brass." Her jaw tightened. "I serve where I'm assigned." He studied her for a moment, then shifted. "Next month, the Navy SEALs are hosting an international sniper competition in Utah. 12 nations, the best marksmen alive. Delta, SAS, KSK, operators who live and breathe precision. I have some influence over who gets selected, and after today, I believe you might be exactly what the competition needs." Her chest tightened. She'd heard of those competitions, whispered about them like ghost stories. 5 days of grueling endurance and precision. Trials that stripped even elite soldiers down to raw nerves. And the thought of standing among them, rifle in hand again, it felt like oxygen filling her lungs. But reality came fast. "Sir, my medical status." "Already discussed with Colonel Michaels," Winters cut her off. "Temporary duty can be arranged. The question is whether you have the nerve." She searched his face. Why would a man who mocked her hours earlier suddenly hand her the chance of a lifetime? "Why me, sir?" Winters' smile was enigmatic. "Let's just say I enjoy giving people the chance to prove themselves. Besides, it would be interesting to see how you perform under real pressure." It was a challenge, a trap, a door opening, maybe all three. "I need time to think." "Tomorrow evening," Winters said. "That's your deadline." He left her there, watching him disappear into the crowd. At her table, Sergeant leaned close. "What the hell was that about?" She explained quietly. Eyes widened, then narrowed. "Sounds incredible, sounds dangerous too. After the way he looked at you today, you sure he isn't setting you up?" She didn't answer, but she thought about it all night, staring at the ceiling of her barracks. Her father's voice came back, the way it always did when she doubted herself. "The world will never give you an easy road. You'll have to take the hard one, and you'll walk it twice as far just to prove you belong." By morning, her decision was made. When she found Winters in headquarters, he barely looked up from his maps. "Yes, Staff Sergeant." "I accept, sir." For the first time, she thought she saw a flicker of something in his expression. Not pride, not joy, maybe satisfaction, maybe something darker. "Very well, pack your gear. We leave for Utah in 2 weeks." He turned back to his maps, dismissing her without another word. But as she walked away, she knew something had shifted. The bucket of brass casings would no longer be her future, at least not yet. That afternoon, Harrison was waiting outside her barracks, his expression thunderous. "You accepted," he said flatly. "How did you?" Word travels, especially when Winters is involved. His voice dropped. "Listen to me. That man doesn't do favors. He's not giving you a shot because he believes in you. He's giving you a shot because he wants to see you fail." Her chin lifted. "Maybe that's exactly why I have to do it, not just for me, for every woman they said couldn't cut it." He studied her face, his weathered eyes softer now. "You're going to do this no matter what I say, aren't you?" "Yes, Sarge." "Then don't embarrass me. I've been telling people for years you're the best natural shooter I've ever trained. Don't make me a liar." She smiled faintly. "I won't." That night she opened her footlocker, hands trembling slightly as she pulled out a small frame. A photo. Her father, desert camo on his shoulders, arm around a teenage girl with a rifle almost too big for her. "You'll have to be twice as good for half the credit," he'd told her when she enlisted. "But I've never known you to back down." She traced his face with a fingertip. "I won't let you down, Dad." The next 2 weeks blurred. Training, conditioning, late nights on the range. She iced her shoulder, wrapped it tight, forced her body into old rhythms it had nearly forgotten. And then she was on a military transport, the Utah desert stretching below her like a wasteland carved by fire. The Naval Special Warfare Advanced Training Facility rose from the dust like something out of myth. Barbed wire, concrete, sand that swallowed boots whole. The morning of the opening ceremony, Morgan polished the brass compass her father had given her at 10 years old. "Always know where true north is," he'd said. A knock pulled her back. When she opened the door, Harrison stood there, older, frailer, but smiling. "Sarge." "What, you think I'd miss this? Not for all the whiskey in Kentucky." "Should you even be here? Your doctor." "My doctor says a lot of things, most of which I ignore." His grin faded, replaced by something more serious. "Besides, someone's got to keep an eye on Winters." She couldn't hide her relief. Having him here meant she wasn't completely alone. The assembly area buzzed. 24 competitors from 12 nations. Russians with cold, dead eyes. Brits with quiet arrogance. Israelis sharp as razors. Every one of them carried themselves like a wolf who had tasted blood. And she the only woman. Her teammate, Davis from Delta Force, barely glanced her way. His body language clear. She didn't belong. The murmurs stopped when Winters appeared, dress uniform gleaming, ribbons heavy on his chest. And beside him, a woman Morgan didn't know, gray hair cropped short, eyes sharp as a blade. "Attention!" They snapped to. Winters' voice carried over the desert wind. "Welcome to the first International Special Operations Sniper Competition. 5 days, known distance, unknown distance, endurance, stress, and finally, extreme long-range precision. By week's end, we'll know who truly deserves the title of the world's best sniper." Morgan felt every eye on her, some mocking, some curious, a few calculating. As the crowd dispersed, the gray-haired officer approached. Staff Sergeant Morgan, Captain Hayes, Pentagon liaison. They shook hands. Hayes' grip was strong, her voice low when she leaned in. "Let's skip the pleasantries. Winters didn't invite you out of kindness. He doesn't just want you to fail, he needs you to." Morgan's blood chilled. "Why?" "There's a program under review, expanding women's roles in special operations. Your performance here could tip the scales. Success, and you open doors. Failure, and he proves his point that women don't belong in this arena." The weight landed on her shoulders like a rucksack. This wasn't just about her anymore. Hayes' expression softened. 20 years ago, I was you. Force recon before it was even legal for women. I fought this same fight every day. I can't help you openly, but I can make sure the deck isn't stacked worse than it already is. Morgan nodded slowly. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me, just survive. That night in her bunk, Morgan lay staring at the compass in her hand. True north. The desert outside was silent, but inside the storm had begun. Why was her scope reading off by 2 clicks when she hadn't touched it? The first morning of the competition dawned sharp and cold, the desert air still holding a trace of night's chill. Competitors lined up at the known distance range, rifles gleaming, flags of 12 nations rippling in the wind. Alexis Morgan knelt at her station, breathing steady, hands sure, but something was wrong. She could feel it. The elevation knob wasn't where she had left it. Subtle, small, enough to throw her off at distance but not obvious enough to scream sabotage. She said nothing. She simply reset the scope and locked it in place. Day 1 was meant to test fundamentals. Targets at 600, 800, 1,000, and finally 1,200 meters. Each competitor given 5 minutes to prepare, 3 rounds at each distance. Standard stuff. The kind of shooting Morgan had done 1,000 times in Afghanistan, with dust storms clawing at her face and adrenaline flooding her veins. But here, under dozens of eyes, she felt the pressure coil in her stomach. Davis, her American teammate, stepped to the line first. He was a mountain in uniform, his weapon a gleaming prototype none of the other competitors had. An integrated ballistic computer, environmental sensors, the kind of technology DARPA whispered about but hadn't fielded. Every shot he fired punched clean through the 10 ring. Perfect, effortless. The crowd nodded approval. The Americans looked strong. When her turn came, she settled behind her standard-issue M24. Old, reliable, no fancy gadgets, just steel, glass, and muscle memory. She exhaled, half-empty, felt her pulse slow. First round 9 ring, second 10, third 10. Not perfect, but strong. At 800 meters, the desert wind began to dance. Her first round drifted into the 8 ring. She adjusted, tightened her focus. The next 2 shots found home. By the time she reached the 1,000-meter stage, heat shimmer had begun to ripple across the sand, making the targets waver like ghosts. She ignored the mirage, trusted her instincts, placed all 3 rounds within the 10 and 9 rings. Her rhythm was back, her body remembered. But then came 1,200. She watched Davis again. This time he switched rifles, another prototype, sleek and deadly. His rounds struck with machine-like precision, all bullseyes. When he rose, his smile was smug, his glance toward her unmistakable. Beat that. She lay prone, adjusted her M24, checked her scope one last time. First shot, 9 ring. Second 10. Third 9. Solid but not spectacular. When scores were posted, Davis sat at the top. A British SAS operator and a Russian soldier followed. Morgan was 5th. Respectable, but not enough. As she secured her rifle, Davis strolled past. Nice shooting for standard issue. His smirk cut sharper than his words. Maybe that's why you're sweeping brass while men like me are still operational. She bit back her retort. Silence was stronger. Later, Harrison found her, leaning on his cane, his eyes narrowed. Check your scope, he muttered. I did. Check it again tomorrow. Someone been messing with it. I saw you compensating all day without realizing. The chill that slid down her spine wasn't from the desert air. Sabotage. She wanted to march straight to the officials, file a complaint, but Harrison shook his head. With no proof, they'll say you're making excuses. You can't give them that satisfaction. She clenched her jaw. Then what? You adapt, you overcome like you always have. That night in her quarters, she stripped the M24 down piece by piece, checked every detail, re-zeroed the scope. And when she closed her eyes, she reminded herself she'd faced worse in Afghanistan. This was just another battlefield. Day 2 began hotter, the sun already burning as they marched into the canyon. Unknown distance day. No rangefinders, no gadgets, no mercy. 10 targets hidden among rocks and scrub. One shot each. Accuracy on the first round mattered more than anything. Davis went before her. When he returned, his face was thunderous. Bullshit course, he spat to another operator. No way to use proper technique with those target placements. Morgan almost smiled. When her turn came, she moved like it was combat. Study the terrain. Judge the distances by memory, by instinct. She remembered Afghanistan, the way you measured men against, the way a boulder became a reference point, the way the shimmer of air told you more than any computer ever could. One by one, she found her rhythm, grass movement for wind, dust particles for cycles of air, shadows for angles. She hit 8 targets on the first round, 2 on the second. When she returned, Harrison was waiting, a rare grin splitting his weathered face. Perfect score. You're in first for the day, 3rd overall now. Her chest loosened for the first time in days. The Russian approached her silently. He studied her a long moment, then nodded. Good shooting, real combat, it shows. It was as close to respect as an operator would ever give, and it meant more than she expected. But the good feeling didn't last. That night, she spotted Winters and Davis talking in hushed tones near the administration building. Their eyes followed her until she disappeared into the barracks. Harrison came to her door not long after. His face was grim. I overheard them. They're planning something tomorrow. Planning what? Navigation component, 20 kilometers with checkpoints. They want to make sure you get lost. Her stomach tightened. How? False information, tampered markers, I don't know, but they're going to try. She sat heavily on her bunk. This is sabotage. Of course it is, but what are you going to do? Quit, cry foul? No, you'll do what you've always done, prepare, adapt, overcome. She nodded slowly, her resolve hardening. Check your ammo tomorrow, Harrison warned. They could tamper with that too. Anything they can twist against you, they will. Don't trust a damn thing you're handed. When he left, she sat staring at the compass in her hands, the one her father gave her. Always know true north. They could sabotage her rifle, her ammo, her maps, but they couldn't touch that. She whispered into the silence, I won't let them win, not like this. The desert outside was utterly still, but inside her chest the storm grew stronger. Why were her coordinates leading her straight into a ridge that wasn't even on the map? The desert sun was only a pale smear on the horizon when the competitors assembled, gear strapped tight, rifles slung. 20 kilometers of sand and rock lay ahead, targets hidden at checkpoints, packs weighing 60 pounds, 8 hours to finish or be disqualified. Captain Hayes addressed them sharply. Each of you will receive sealed coordinates for your checkpoints. They are unique. You'll be released at staggered intervals. Accuracy, time, and navigation will determine your score. Morgan accepted her envelope. Inside, 5 sets of coordinates printed on laminated card. She slipped them into her GPS, adjusted her compass, and checked her water supply. Already, her shoulder ached beneath the weight of her gear. The scar tissue pulled with each motion, reminding her she wasn't the soldier she used to be, at least not in body. But she'd learned to live with pain. Pain was honest. Her start time came. She moved quickly through rocky terrain toward checkpoint 1, a ravine, red flag waving, spotter waiting with a scope. The target lay 600 meters out, half hidden in brush. She dropped prone, calculated quickly, and squeezed. 9 ring. Good enough. Checkpoint 2, 800 meters, clean 10. Checkpoint 3, a merciful water resupply. She drank deep, refilled, and shouldered her pack again. The sun climbed higher, baking the sand until heat shimmer danced like fire across the flats. 95 degrees by mid-morning. Sweat soaked her uniform, her breath rasped. She rationed water carefully, knowing dehydration would betray her aim later. Then came checkpoint 4. According to her coordinates, she should be approaching a dry riverbed. Instead, a ridge rose in front of her, jagged and steep. Her compass said she was on the right bearing. Her GPS agreed, but the terrain told another story. She stopped, sweat dripping into her eyes. Her pulse spiked not from exertion, but from suspicion. This wasn't an error, this was deliberate. Her father's voice rose in memory. When in doubt, get to high ground, see the bigger picture. So she climbed. The ridge tore at her boots. Her pack dragged her shoulders raw. Every step felt like it could rip her scar tissue loose. She gritted her teeth and kept moving. At the top, gasping for air, she scanned the horizon. And there, 2 kilometers northwest, a red flag fluttered at what had to be checkpoint 4, nowhere near where her coordinates placed it. She swallowed her anger. Anger wouldn't save her. Calm would. She marked the checkpoint on her map, reoriented, and pushed down the ridge. The detour had cost her nearly an hour. The range officer at checkpoint 4 looked surprised. "Staff Sergeant Morgan, you're late." "Had some navigation issues," she replied flatly, setting up for her shot. Target, awkward angle, prone position digging into her shoulder. The ache flared white-hot, but she ignored it. 9 ring, solid. As she packed her gear, the officer said, "Funny, you're the first one through this checkpoint today." Her head snapped up. "That can't be right, several started before me." He checked his log. No one else has come through. Her stomach tightened. Either everyone had received false coordinates, or she'd been deliberately given a different, harder course. Checkpoint 5 confirmed it. Another brutal climb, another unstable firing position. She made the shot, but it cost her everything she had left. By the time she stumbled across the finish line, the sun hung low and bloody. Her body screamed. Her uniform clung, soaked through. Her shoulder throbbed so badly she could barely unsling her rifle. Official time, 7 hours, 42 minutes, 18 minutes shy of disqualification. Davis lounged under a canopy, fresh as if he'd strolled a park. His smirk cut deep. "Tough day, Morgan. You look like you've been through hell." "How long did it take you?" 5 hours, 17 minutes. Easiest nav course I've ever run. Checkpoints were right where they were supposed to be." Her silence was answer enough. She found Harrison waiting near the med tent, worry etched deep. "Jesus, Morgan, you look half dead. What happened out there?" "My coordinates were wrong, completely wrong. Checkpoint 4 was 2 kilometers off. Officer there said no one else came through. I was on a different course than everyone else." Harrison's jaw clenched. "They're not even pretending anymore." "The good news, I finished. The bad news, my shooting slipped. I probably dropped in the standings." "Don't be so sure. Word is, a lot of competitors struggled. Even Davis missed one at the final checkpoint." Before she could reply, Captain Hayes appeared. Her face unreadable, her voice low. "Staff Sergeant, medical evaluation is mandatory after the trek. Report to the tent." Morgan nodded, too exhausted to argue. Hayes lingered a heartbeat longer. "For the record, you completed the senior instructor course today, not the competitor course. Navigation error in the assignment process." Her tone made it clear. No error at all. The medic examined her, ice pressed to her shoulder. "Inflammation, nothing torn. Take anti-inflammatories tonight. You'll be cleared tomorrow." When she left, she spotted Harrison speaking quietly with the Russian. They both fell silent when she approached. "What's going on?" she asked. Harrison glanced at who finally said, "You were not the only one given wrong course. Myself. All from top standings yesterday." Morgan absorbed this. So it wasn't just her. They were stacking the deck against anyone who threatened their golden boy. "There's more," added. "Tomorrow, stress shoot. Americans have trained on that exact course for weeks. They know everything, every angle, every trick." "How do you know?" she asked. His mouth twitched almost a smile. In my country we say trust but verify. I verify everything. He walked away, leaving her standing in the dust. Harrison put a hand on her shoulder. They're not making this fair, you know that now. She exhaled. How am I supposed to compete when they keep changing the rules? Your father ever tell you about the Kuwait op? Harrison asked. She nodded faintly. They gave him bad maps, wrong coordinates, half the gear he requested. He finished anyway. And what did he say after? That it was the best thing that ever happened to him. Taught him to trust his instincts over his orders. Exactly, they can take your gear, your maps, your ammo, but not this. He tapped her forehead, then her chest, and not this. For the first time that day, she smiled faintly. But as Harrison turned to leave, his smile faltered. His hand flew to his chest, his face contorted. Sarge. He staggered, nearly falling. Sarge, she caught him, heart lurching. His lips were pale, his breath ragged. It's nothing, he gasped, just indigestion. No, she knew the signs, the gray face, the shallow breaths, the pain that folded him in half. Medic, she screamed, her voice ripping through the desert night. Within minutes, medics surrounded him, loading him onto a stretcher, oxygen mask pressed over his face. Morgan tried to follow. I'm coming. Negative, Staff Sergeant, the senior medic said firmly. You're still in competition. There's nothing you can do for him now. He's my friend. And he'd want you to finish what you started, the medic said, his tone softening. We'll take good care of him, that's a promise. She stood frozen, watching the ambulance lights fade into the desert darkness. The silence that followed was deafening. Her chest ached in ways her scars never had. Why did it feel like every rifle on the range was pointed at her, even when she wasn't the target? The desert morning carried no wind, no relief, just stillness that pressed heavy on the skin. Competitors gathered at the stress shoot course, an obstacle field designed to strip away calm, to shred fine motor skills, to force shooters into errors. Sandbags, walls, ropes, tires, then precision shots under time pressure. It was the test soldiers dreaded most because it revealed not just skill, but the soul underneath. Morgan adjusted her sling, trying not to think about Harrison. She hadn't heard an update since medics carried him off the night before. The image lingered, his face gray, his hand clutching at his chest. She forced it down, but the ache inside her ribs stayed. A whistle blew. Davis went first. He sprinted, vaulted, dragged his body through sand, rifle bouncing against his back. Sweat poured, but his movements were clean, rehearsed. At the firing line, he dropped prone, slammed a mag in, and fired like the weapon was an extension of his will. 10 rounds, 10 bullseyes. When he finished, the applause was loud, too loud, the kind that didn't feel organic. Winters clapped the loudest. Then came slower, methodical. By the time he reached the firing line, his chest heaved like a furnace. But when he shot, the air seemed to pause. Each crack from his rifle landed true. 8 bullseyes, 2 nines. Respectful nods followed, muted but real. Morgan's turn came last. She stepped onto the course, heat slamming into her lungs. Sandbags first, awkward, heavy. Her shoulders screamed as she hauled them onto the platform, scar tissue straining with every lift. Then the wall. She dug her boots in, climbed, breath ragged, dropped on the far side hard enough to rattle her teeth. The rope crawl burned her arms, her uniform ripping against the coarse fibers. She thought of Afghanistan, climbing into overwatch positions with a 50-pound rifle, the ridge lines endless, the air razor-thin. She had done worse. She could do this. By the time she reached the firing line, her lungs were fire. She dropped prone, cheek against the stock. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, threatening to throw her rhythm off. First shot 10. Second 9. Third 10. She breathed, forcing calm. Her vision tunneled, but her trigger finger was steady. 10 rounds fired, 7 bullseyes, 3 nines. Not perfect, but strong. And yet the silence after was different. Not applause, not respect, just murmurs, calculated indifference. Winter's voice cut through it. Respectable, but clearly not on par with the best. His eyes flicked toward Davis, who stood tall and smug. Morgan kept her face neutral. Inside, anger burned, but anger wouldn't serve her. After scores were posted, Davis sat firmly at the top. Second, Morgan slid to fourth overall, still in striking distance but slipping. She found herself standing alone at the water station, wiping sweat from her brow. Captain Hayes appeared at her side, voice low. "They're watching you closer now." "Who?" "Everyone, officials, commanders, the Pentagon. The narrative forming is simple. Davis is the golden boy. You're the outlier. If you stumble, they'll say it proves their point. That women can't hold up under combat stress." Morgan's throat tightened. "And if I don't stumble?" Hayes studied her a moment. "Then you make them rewrite the narrative, but it'll cost you more than they'll ever admit." The words lingered like a shadow. That evening, Morgan went to the medical tent under pretense of icing her shoulder. In truth, she wanted news. Harrison lay in a cot, pale but alive, monitors beeping softly beside him. "Don't you dare cry," he rasped, catching her before she could speak. She smiled despite herself. "You scared the hell out of me, Sarge." "Wasn't my intention, just a minor hiccup." His eyes softened. "How's it going out there?" "They're stacking the deck against me." "They've always stacked it against you." His voice was weak but sharp. "That's the story of your whole damn career. You gonna let it break you now?" Her throat ached. "No." "Good, because listen to me, Morgan. These bastards don't care about your score. They care about the story they get to tell when this is over. You can't just shoot well. You've got to carry yourself like the story's already yours." She squeezed his hand, swallowing hard. "I'll make you proud." "You already did." When she left, the desert night felt colder. Day 4 came with more sabotage. At the staging area, she found one of her magazines missing. Another felt suspiciously light. She shook the rounds into her palm. One was dented deliberately, subtly, enough to jam under stress. She replaced it quietly. No complaints, no excuses. The challenge was moving targets. Steel plates on tracks, darting side to side. Competitors had seconds to identify and fire, simulating hostage rescues. Davis dominated again, his high-tech rifle giving him a margin no one else could match. Morgan's turn came, sweat dripping into her eyes. First plate hit. Second hit. Third jam. Her stomach plummeted. She cleared it fast, hands moving by instinct, every second a lifetime. Reset, refocus, fire, hit. She finished the course, but the jam cost her time. Her score slid again. When results posted, she was fifth. Davis untouchable at first. The whispers grew. "She's cracking, she can't keep up. This is where she breaks." She heard them, she felt them. But she remembered Harrison's words. "They don't care about your score. They care about the story." That night she lay awake, staring at the compass, true north. Her father's voice came back. "Sometimes the point isn't winning. Sometimes the point is refusing to lose." She rolled the compass in her palm, the brass warm from her skin. Refusing to lose, that she could do. The final day loomed, extreme long range, the 2-mile shot, the same impossible distance she had faced at Fort, the distance Winters had mocked. This was it. One shot to define her. Why did the target at 2 miles look less like steel and more like the ghost of her father? The morning of the final event broke sharp and cruel, the desert horizon painted in fire. Competitors stood in a loose half-circle, each called one by one to take their shot. 2 miles, 3,285 meters. The kind of distance most called fantasy, the kind that required not only skill but faith. Went first. He steadied his rifle, adjusted carefully, and squeezed. The crack of his round echoed. A plume of dust kicked up low and left. Miss. He corrected, fired again. Nearer this time. Third round, the steel plate rang faint, a ghostly chime that carried across the silence. Respectful nods followed. Others tried. A few hit. Most didn't. Every attempt felt like rolling dice against physics itself. Then it was Davis. He stepped to the platform, his prototype rifle gleaming, computer displays flickering faint blue against the rising sun. He didn't look at the wind. He didn't taste the air. The rifle did it for him. First shot, ring. Second shot, ring. Third shot, ring. He rose slowly, almost theatrically, as if savoring the weight of the moment. Applause broke, orchestrated, swelling louder than it should have. Winters smiled like a man who had won a bet. Then Staff Sergeant Morgan stepped forward. Her boots sank into the sand. Her M24 felt like it weighed twice what it should. She dropped prone, rifle pressed into her shoulder, cheek against the stock. The target wavered in the heat, shimmering, uncertain. And then she noticed it. Her rear sight had been loosened. The tiniest twist, enough to throw her elevation completely at this distance. Subtle, nearly invisible, deliberate. Her pulse spiked. She could complain, she could call sabotage, but she knew how it would sound: excuses, weakness. Instead, she reached slowly for her compass. Not to use it, but to feel the weight of it in her palm. A reminder: true north was never given, it was chosen. She thought of Harrison in the med tent, telling her the story wasn't in the score but in how she carried herself. She thought of Hayes, warning her that her performance could open or close doors for every woman who came after. She thought of her father that day in the desert, his arm around her shoulders. "You'll have to walk the hard road, twice as far, but I've never known you to back down." She set the compass beside her rifle, let it anchor her. Then she adjusted, by feel, by instinct, not trusting the sabotaged sight but trusting herself. First shot, wide, dust plumed high. She exhaled, steady. Second shot, closer. She recalculated wind, accounted for heat shimmer, the earth's curve, the breath in her lungs. Third shot, she squeezed. The desert rang. The faint metallic ping of steel carried across the silence. The crowd gasped, some in disbelief, some in awe. She lowered her rifle, breath shuddering. She had done it. Not as clean as Davis, not perfect, but undeniable. Winter's face was stone. As officials tallied final scores, she stood alone, her rifle slung, her compass clutched tight. The numbers would put her in second place, she knew. Davis would take the crown. The golden boy, flawless, untouchable. But that wasn't the story people would remember. They would remember the woman with a shoulder and an old rifle who hit steel at 2 miles despite sabotage. They would remember the silence she carried like a weapon. When results were read, Davis stood on the podium, first place medal gleaming. Third, Morgan second. Davis raised his arms high, basking in applause. Cameras clicked, officials clapped. But when Morgan stepped forward for her medal, something strange happened. The applause shifted, louder, longer, more real. Because even those who doubted her couldn't deny what they had seen. She caught Hayes' eye in the crowd. The captain gave the faintest nod. Approval, respect. And when she turned, she saw Winters. His smile was gone, replaced by something darker: calculation, resentment, a promise. This wasn't over. That night, as she sat alone in the desert quiet, she thought about the irony. She hadn't won, not on paper, but somehow it felt like victory anyway. Her compass glinted in the moonlight. She turned it over in her hand, whispering to the night. True north. The stars above were cold and bright. And for the first time in years, she felt aligned. Why did the headlines mention Davis first, but her face was the one in the photographs? 3 days after the competition ended, the world had already chosen its story. Newspapers carried triumphant images of Davis on the podium, medal gleaming, grin wide. American marksman dominates international sniper competition. But tucked deeper in those same pages, almost buried, was a different story. A photograph of her, sand still clinging to her uniform, compass glinting faintly by her hand. The caption was short. Staff Sergeant Alexis Morgan, the only female competitor, lands a 2-mile shot. That was the image that spread. Not the official winner, not the polished champion. The woman they hadn't expected, holding steady against sabotage, scar tissue, and silence. Back at the base, Morgan sat in the chow hall, tray untouched, scrolling through headlines on her phone. Comments scrolled faster than she could read them. Unbelievable. No way she did it without tech, respect. She makes the rest of us look soft. Fluke. Legend. Confusion and awe mingled with doubt. She shut the phone off, sliding it away like it burned. Harrison sat across from her, pale but alive, a paper cup of black coffee shaking in his hand. "You see it." "I saw enough." "People don't forget something like that." He smiled faintly. "You think anyone cares who stood on the top of that podium? They don't. They care about the story." She frowned. "And what's the story, Sarge?" "That you didn't break. Not when they stacked the deck, not when they tried to bury you. You stood. That's what they'll remember." His words steadied her, but only for a moment, because the shadow of Winters lingered. He had called her into his office the day after the competition. The smile he wore wasn't victory. It was warning. "Congratulations, Staff Sergeant. You performed beyond expectation. Truly. But don't mistake applause for acceptance. You may have earned attention, but attention cuts both ways." Her silence held. Winters leaned closer. "The brass will spin this however they like. They'll hold you up as an exception. But when the dust settles, the world will return to normal. Men like Davis on the podium, men like me in command, and women like you, side stories, footnotes." She felt the heat rise in her chest, but she forced her voice steady. "We'll see about that, sir." His smile sharpened. "We will." And now, 3 days later, she sat in the chow hall, listening to soldiers murmur. Not about Davis, about her. "Did you hear she hit it? 2 miles, with an M24. They tried to rig it against her, and she still did it. Bet the brass won't like that." The whispers spread like wildfire, not official, not recorded, but alive. Hayes approached her table later, the captain's boots crisp against the tile. She didn't sit, only rested her hands behind her back. "You've done more than you realize, Staff Sergeant." Morgan looked up. "Feels like I lost." "On paper, yes, but paper burns, stories last." "Doesn't feel like enough." "It never does," Hayes said softly. "When I walked out of Force Recon 20 years ago, I thought I'd failed, thought the system had beaten me. But years later, I learned every door that opened for women after me opened because I refused to shut mine. You may not see the change now, but it's coming, because of you." The words cut deep, leaving her both proud and restless. That night, Morgan stood outside the barracks, the desert wind brushing her face. She thought of her father again, the man who had taught her to hold a rifle steady, who had whispered that she'd have to fight twice as hard for half the recognition. She had fought, she had bled, she had endured, and now. Now the world stared at her, waiting to see what she'd do next. And still inside, doubt gnawed. Was it enough to prove them wrong once? Or would she need to do it again and again until she broke? Her compass gleamed in her hand, true north, always pointing, always steady. She whispered to herself, voice barely audible, "What now?" The desert didn't answer, only the stars, cold and endless, listening in silence. The following week, orders arrived. She was to report back to fort, no mention of commendation, no recognition, just routine reassignment. But attached to the orders was a note, handwritten, no signature. "They'll try to erase this, don't let them." Her hand tightened around the paper. The fight wasn't over, it had barely begun. Why did the world feel louder when she came home? Yet inside she carried only silence. Fort looked the same as it always had, barracks lined in perfect symmetry, flags snapping in Carolina wind, the grind of drills echoing across parade grounds. Soldiers moved in cadence, rifles slung, faces hard. Life went on as though nothing had changed. For them, maybe nothing had. But for Alexis Morgan, everything had. She walked the familiar paths, duffel over her shoulder, compass tucked safe in her pocket. The whispers had followed her back, stories carried faster than official reports ever could. The woman who hit 2 miles, the one they couldn't break. Davis had returned too, hailed as champion, his name etched into official records. Commanders shook his hand. Photographs lined the halls. The golden boy untouchable. And yet when she passed through the corridors, soldiers she didn't know nodded quietly. Some offered faint smiles. Some only looked. But their eyes said what words didn't: we saw, we know. It was small, subtle, but real. She unpacked her gear in silence. The medals, the commendations, the proof of years spent in dust and fire, she left tucked away. Only the compass sat on the desk, its brass worn, needle steady. Days became weeks. Routine swallowed her again, training ranges, maintenance, silent nights staring at barrack ceilings. On the surface, nothing had changed, but she felt the weight of expectation now. Not just hers, others. Young women in uniform who lingered at the edge of formation, eyes finding her, holding on just long enough to say, "You showed us it's possible." The burden pressed heavy. Harrison called her once he was discharged from medical. His voice was weaker, but sharp as ever. "You think it's over, don't you?" "Feels like it." "Wrong, it's just started. You've become something you didn't ask to be, proof, and proof doesn't get to rest." She leaned back against her bunk, eyes closed. "What if I'm not strong enough to carry that?" His chuckle crackled through the phone. "You already are. You proved it in the desert. You proved it every time they tried to bury you and you stood back up. You think strength is about never doubting. It's not. It's about doubting and going forward anyway." She let the words settle, heavy and true. Weeks later, she sat in a classroom observing a new crop of recruits. 4 rows of uniforms, eager faces, wide eyes. One girl in the back caught her attention, small, quiet, overlooked, just like she had been once. During break, the girl approached shyly. "Ma'am, is it true? You really hit a target at 2 miles." Morgan hesitated, then smiled faintly. "That's what they say." The girl's voice dropped. "They tell us women can't keep up, that we're liabilities." Morgan studied her a long moment. She saw the doubt, the hunger, the flicker of defiance. She remembered being that age, alone, ignored, carrying the weight of proving not just herself but everyone like her. "You want the truth?" Morgan asked softly. The girl nodded. "It's harder, twice as hard. You'll carry weight they'll never understand. You'll fight battles they'll never see, and it won't be fair, not once." She paused. "But it's possible, that's what matters." The girl's eyes glistened. She whispered, "How do you do it?" Morgan reached into her pocket, pulled out the compass and placed it gently in the girl's hand. "Find your true north, and don't let anyone turn you away from it." The girl clutched it like treasure, her chin lifting ever so slightly. Morgan watched her return to her seat. For the first time in weeks, the silence inside felt lighter. That night, alone in her quarters, she sat at the desk with nothing but a blank page in front of her. Slowly, she began to write, not for official record, not for command, for the ones who came next. She wrote about the desert, the sabotage, the doubt, the impossible shot. She wrote about pain that taught resilience, about silence that carried more weight than shouts. And as she wrote, she realized something. The story was never about a competition. It was about survival, about dignity, about refusing to let others decide what she was worth. When she finished, she closed the notebook softly. The words weren't perfect. They didn't need to be. They were hers. Outside, the night was quiet. Stars spread endless above Fort. She whispered into the stillness, the words steady now. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." The stars didn't answer. They didn't need to. Because in the silence, Alexis Morgan knew her compass still pointed true. And that was enough.